Okay, well, welcome to the centerpiece of this mastery session. It is called Finding Your Ultimate Leverage. I hope you're ready for some seriously game-changing insights because this is it. I recently shared a bit of what you're about to see and hear with my elite CEO forum group. Now, you have to understand, this is a group of 24 uber successful men and women, the best of the best, personally handpicked by me to be in this group. You have to be invited in. It's not something you can just sign up for or buy your way into. One of our sessions was having each of them present an idea to the group that has resulted in at least a $250,000 bottom line result to their income, and something that everybody else in the room could also apply to get the same result. Well, after they've all gone, and in wrapping up what was one of the most memorable weekends I think any of us has ever had, I shared what I'm about to share with you. And in the closing comments, most of them remarked in particular how this information was the most game-changing for them. So I only tell you that because if it was a game changer for those already at the level of uber success, no doubt it can be fantastically meaningful for you too. So get your pen and notepads ready. I mentioned in the last segment my interview with the centenarian, and he had summarized his 100 years of wisdom onto a single piece of paper that was only 2/3 filled out, that was responsible for all his wealth, all his success, all the love and admiration that he has with his family, his community, and the marketplace that he served. At the top of that list, on that piece of paper, read this: small causes create big results. Find and focus on the key small causes. Really, the rest of our time together, after I started reading what was on that piece of paper, was him explaining this single concept. He said if he were to boil down all his wealth, success, and the key to his fantastic lifestyle to a single concept, this was it. He said it all came down to finding and focusing on the small things that caused big results in any endeavor he chose to be successful at. He said it makes life simpler, it makes life easier, and your return on effort, energy, and investment is dramatically different. He said it's the ultimate leverage in life. And he promised once you fully understand the secret, you can accomplish more in a year than most do in a lifetime. It's that powerful. And over a lifetime, you can accomplish more than most do in what could be the equivalent of 10 or 20 lifetimes, as he certainly had. In fact, it really is the difference between what those whom you see on the cover of Success have found and do differently than everyone else. This is their ultimate leverage, utilizing the same time, the same money, the same resources, the same talent, the same intelligence, and the same background most people have. Their results are 10, 50 to 100 times more than everybody else. And this is the key: finding that ultimate leverage. So let me take you through it. It really all stems off of a concept that you already know, but don't know it, I would say, as well as you should, because I've known this concept for a long time, but it wasn't until I've really understood how it applies to anything and everything around you, and more particularly practicing it as well as you should. And it goes much deeper than 80-20. Okay, 80% of effects come from 20% of the causes. We know that. We understand it intellectually. It's something that is in our knowledge bank, but I want to show you how to truly apply it to key areas of your life and go much deeper than 80-20. All right, are you ready? Let's go. Let's say, for instance, that you were the director of public works for the city, and you had to repair the potholes on your entire street infrastructure, but you had a very limited budget. How do you allocate that budget? A lot of times they just go to the squeakiest wheels, right? The people who complain the most, who've sent the most letters in, or are standing at the front counter complaining about the potholes on their street, or the streets in which their city council happens to live. Obviously, not an effective way in which to allocate the resources. So if you really start to study the grid of your infrastructure, here's what it comes down to. 80% of traffic is carried by 20% of the roads. So if you were really going to have the greatest impact, you would focus fixing the 20% of the roads that are carrying 80% of the impact. That would actually solve 80% of the problem. Now, let's say you don't even have a budget that big. What do you do then? Well, then you start to go to the 20% of the 20%. And now we're starting to get into the key to this whole equation. So what that looks like is 64% of the traffic in any city is carried by 4% of the roads. If you were to take all the roads within a city, 4% of those roads are carrying 64% of the traffic. If you just focused your budget on fixing those 4% roads, you would fix 64% of the problem. You see how you can have a much greater impact with a much smaller budget, resources, time, energy, effort, and so forth. If you went to the 20% of the 20% of the 20%, this is what it would look like. In reality, in any city, about 52% of the traffic is carried by 0.8% of the roads, meaning less than 1% of the roads are carrying more than half of all the traffic in any city. So if you just allocated the budget to the less than 1% of the roads within your city, you would actually have an impact on half or more of the traffic in the entire city. That's how you can start seeing massive leverage with your budget dollars, energy, effort, and resources to accomplishing the mass problem that you're faced with. All right, let's dig this a little bit further. This is how it applies to your life. We know the 80-20 rule. 80% of results come from 20% of the activities, but we also now can see that 64% of your results come from 4% of your activities, meaning 4% of the things that you do throughout the day is having a 64% impact on your results. And further, less than 1% of the things that you do throughout the day are delivering more than half your results. That's activities. We also know that this about customers. 80% of your profits come from 20% of your customers. 64% of your profits come from about 4% of your customers. Half your profits come from less than 1% of your customers. So now we apply this to other areas. Take a look at your marketing. 80% of your traffic, where no matter whether it's radio, TV, print, newsletter, direct mail, what have you, 80% of all your lead generation comes from about 20% of your marketing right now. Now, dig this a little deeper. You can start to see where you can get some massive leverage. 64% of your traffic is probably coming from about 4% of your marketing, and more than half's coming from less than 1%. Salespeople in your organization, depending upon the size of your organization, you can pretty much find this Pareto principle to apply. 80% of the sales come from about 20% of the salespeople, 64% from 4%, and more than half the sales come from less than 1% of your sales staff. Again, this all depends on the number of salespeople that you've got to see whether you've got enough girth in order to make these numbers more and more visible for you. Problems. When you start to assess all those things that are giving you problems, headaches, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, what have you, we know that 80% of problems come from 20% of employees or 20% of customers or 20% of parts of your business or 20% of the departments in your organization, and so forth. 64% from 4% and more than half from less than 1%. All right. Let's really kind of take this into all the little nuances of your world. Do you realize, and you'll know this is true when you think about it, 80% of your time is spent in about 20% of your house. Think about it. So your kitchen, maybe your family room, your bedroom, your master bath. In those few places, 80% of your time is occupied. Now, if you were to dig this a little deeper, you could see 64% of your time is spent in 4% of your house. Or let's take it down to the ridiculous. In about 0.8% of your house, let's say the side of the bed in which you sleep on, the counter of your master bathroom sink in which you stand in front of, the spot of the couch that you normally sit in, the chair that you sit in around the dinner table, in less than 1% of your house, you spend more than half your time. So what does that mean? That means that in those areas, you should make your house awesome. The most comfortable, the most convenient, the most luxurious in those 1% spots. That also means that there's a lot of places in your house where you're spending a lot of time, energy, money, and resources that really don't matter that much at all. You're not spending or giving attention or affecting your lifestyle by very much at all. Now you can start to see how you allocate time, energy, resources, and investment when you understand this Pareto principle in its greater depth. Let's take a look at another example. The clothes that you wear. You realize that you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. And if you think about it, you've always got your favorite go-tos, right? I know that I do. And when you dig it a little bit deeper, 4% of your clothes you're wearing 64% of the time, and you've got your favorites, right? Those things that are your staples, where your spouse calls it your uniform, right? Those less than 1% of your clothes that you're wearing probably about half the time. What does that mean? That means that you could take all of the rest of your clothes, at least 80% of it, and put it in a place of purgatory. If you don't go looking for it, you can go and donate it. It can literally be pruned out, stripped out of your closet, and it will have very little, if any, impact whatsoever on your life and lifestyle. It also means that those few things that you're going to be wearing a lot, they should be awesome. They should be high quality. Don't cheap out on those 1% areas, and then don't give so much investment to those items that you're not going to see wear or have much impact on your ongoing life and lifestyle. Okay, there's where we're starting to find the leverage points. Spread this out over everywhere. Here's where you could see Pareto everywhere. The location of your customers, the popularity of your products, the customer service problems that are inside your organization, the sources of web traffic, reasons why customers buy. If you just apply this Pareto principle to what those main features and benefits are, focused your conversation on those things, focused your development of enhancing the product and improving the product on those few things, you could see where you can get massive leverage. Start turning away from the things that don't fit inside the Pareto principle. Problem employees and even friends. You take a look at your network of friends. You are spending half your time with 1% of your friends and all the way down the line. Take a look at this. This is interesting. You just take the whole wealth of the world on a macro level, you could see where this Pareto principle is applied. There's 196 countries that control 79 trillion. 80% of the countries, 63 trillion, comes from 22 countries. 80% of the wealth of the world comes from 22 countries. 63% of the wealth comes from 10 countries. And get this, 19% of the wealth of the world comes from one country. That means 0.5% of the countries on this planet produce 20% of the world's wealth. And we all know what country that is. Now, take a look at it on an individual level. This is the wealthiest individuals in the world. The Walmart group, Microsoft, the Koch brothers, and so forth. If you look at the wealth of the 10 wealthiest people in the world, this is what it comes down to. A total of 381 billion. The top 3 of those 10 own 55% of the wealth. As extraordinary as the wealth is across the 10, the top 3 own 55%. So you can start to see just kind of how this is applied everywhere. That's only as a reference point where you can start to see this everywhere. That's kind of what I'm trying to get your lens of the way you look at the world to see how this applies everywhere. So here's what you do with this information. If you focus further, you can gain massive leverage. Here's the deal. Take 100% of your time, energy, and resources, and if you reallocate 80% of your time to the 20% that produces 80% of the results, do you realize that you multiply your return on energy, effort, and resources 16 times, 16 to 1. It's not an 80% improvement. It is a 16 times improvement. Let's take this a level deeper. If you focus your efforts on the 4% that produce 64% of the results, you get a 250 to 1 ROI. Your ROI increases by 250 times. Focus on that 0.8 and you get a 4,000% improvement in return on investment, energy, and effort. And you take this even a level deeper. You focus your efforts on the point 2 in whatever area, customers, problems, activities, salespeople, what have you, and you get a 65,000% increase in return on energy effort. This is a 65,000% greater leverage, and that's what you're looking for. All right, here's what it looks like spread out over a graph. Most people are spending 100% of their time, and this is how it's being allocated across the width. What you want to do is you want to take all this effort that you're expending, okay, all throughout the day, all the tasks, all the to-do lists, all the things that are vying for your attention, all the solicitations on your energy, effort, and so forth, and you want to focus it and reallocate it over here into the right corner. Your number one job is to transfer resources from the left to the right. Transfer your time to the left, to the right. Transfer your effort from the left to the right. Transfer your investment to the left, your creativity, your energy, your focus to the left, and move it to the right. There's where you get massive leverage. All right, now let's focus on this one important category at a time. Let's look at your customers and how we can apply the Pareto principle and the depth of the Pareto principle to your customers. So here's how it looks. We know that 80% of your profits come from about 20% of your customers, and 64% of your profits come from about 4% of your customers. If all we do is this, do twice the amount of business with the 4% of your customers, it increases your profits by 64%. Take time that you're spreading across the board, reallocate it towards the 4%, and it gives you a 250 times return on energy effort. It is a 250 to 1 leverage point. Then, another key, fire or reduce time and bandwidth to the 80% that are taking up time, energy, and resources and not giving you the result. And then, once you do that, you can gain your life back. You can reduce your stress, reduce anxiety. You get high output, high reward, high outcome, and have to extend a lot less effort. Okay, that's the key. So this is the way it looks to most people. They have 30 customers. They spread their time across 30 customers. All right, normal, right? 30 times effort if you are servicing 30 customers. The truth about your customers looks like this. Let me take you through it. 16 of these customers are generating about 20% of the results. 8 customers are generating about 20% of the result. 4 customers are generating about 20% of the result. 2 customers are generating about 20% of the result. And 1 customer is generating the other 20% of the result. So what do you do with this reality? Once you understand where your business is coming from which customers, here's what you do. Spend more time with the 1. Now, if your numbers aren't 30 customers or 300 or 3,000 or 30,000, then multiply these numbers as well. Okay, I'm giving you simple math to use so that you can see the principle, and then you can allocate your time based on your mathematics. If you just take the one that's responsible for 20% by themselves of your result or your profits, if you 2x your time, energy, effort, and draw 2 times the amount of business from only allocated to only 3% of your total customers, that means that you've increased your effort by 6%. However, you've increased the result by 64%. Do you see that? You see, only 3% of your customers is generating 20% of your result. If you 2x, which means you double your effort from 3% to 6%, you increase your result by 64%. That's leverage. Here's the mistake most people make. They treat all customers equally. However, all customers are not treating your business equally. So the lesson here is, when it comes to customers, focus more on the few who are focusing more on you. And in return, you are rewarded with significantly multiplied result. All right. Here's another thing we know. 20% of customers will spend 4 times the amount of money. 1% will spend 50 times the amount of money. Focus more on the fewer. And let me give you a bonus tip here while we're here. A lot of people build a product that they love and they're excited about, and then they go and try to find a customer who wants to buy it. Instead, here's what I want to encourage you to do. Find a customer, and you probably already have a database of customers. Okay, so you have found a customer. Now, build them a product they want to buy. You see, multiply your consumerism with your existing customers as your path towards greater leverage, greater revenue, and greater profits. Instead of going and building a new product and trying to find a whole new customer base for it, just expand your business with your existing customers, and there's massive, massive leverage in that. So here's the bottom line when it comes to focusing on your customers. You want to move your time, energy, effort, and investment from the 80-20 to the 64-4 to the 52 to the 0.8 to the 40% to the 0.2, as low as you possibly, as narrow, as focused as you possibly can. That increases your leverage exponentially. Let's take a look at marketing. Another really big application for the Pareto principle here. We know that 80% of traffic comes from 20% and down the line. So here's what you can do about this. And this is John Wanamaker. And, he had a famous quote that said, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." This is the problem you want to overcome yourself. So you want to take 80% of wasted money that's being spent on marketing that's not producing the result worth its investment. And people do this all the time. They just throw, mud against the wall and they don't even know what's sticking or why it's sticking. So you want to take 80% of your wasted money and pour it right into that 20%. The result is not 4 times better, okay? It is 16 times better. A 16 times improvement and a 96% improvement on profits. So find your 4% and reallocate spending there, and the result is not 16 times better, it is 250 times better. So here's what you want to do. Stop making the mistake of throwing mud against the wall, knowing that something's sticking, but not knowing what or why. Instead, track everything, cut the losers, double down on what works. You want to move your focus from not just 80-20, but 64-4. If you can go to 52.8 or 40.2, you'll see your leverage increase exponentially. Let's take a look at salespeople. Apply the Pareto principle to salespeople. So we know 80% of sales comes from 20% down the line. So if we have this as a framework, we know this, we need to start looking for it, allocate it, track it, and then start making some different decisions. So let's say you have 10 salespeople. Now, if you have 100, if you have 1,000, you have 10,000, you have 100,000, just multiply these numbers. The math is the same. Let's say you have 10 salespeople. 2 will produce 80% of the sales, the results. We know that. And 8 of the 10 will produce 20%. Now, those 2, the one producing 80%, they're not 80% more valuable. That's the way that it's understood in the mind, but that's the mistake. They're not 80% more valuable. They are 16 times more valuable. If they were paid 16 times more than everybody else, if they were treated 16 times better than everybody else, then it would be equivalent to what they are returning to the enterprise. Now let's say, stretching this out, you have 100 salespeople. Well, then we know that 4 of the 100 are 250 times more valuable. Let's say you've got 1,000 people. We know now that 8 of the 1,000 are 4,000 times more valuable than everybody else. And let's say you have 10,000 people, like many large direct selling companies or pharmaceutical companies, what have you. Here's what we know. Out of 10,000 salespeople, 2 of them are 65,000 times more valuable than all the rest of them, or on the average of all the rest of them. Because here's the reason why this is difficult for most people to get their head around. We grew up with the bell curve, and the bell curve shows 77% as average. But the best isn't 23% better than average. Okay? That's where it would fit, the bell curve would fit on the leverage curve here. That's not a reality in terms of how it produces ultimate results. Here's what it looks like. They're not 23% better. They are 50 to 100 times better. The best are significantly more valuable and produce significantly greater results. See, the way to understand this, to get your head around it, is understand it like a Richter scale about how you measure the impact of an earthquake. We know that a 5.0 is barely noticeable on the Richter scale for an earthquake. A 6.0, even though it's only one numerical number greater, is 10 times more powerful and will knock a few things off the shelf. A 7.0 is 1,000 times more powerful and will level homes. That was what happened in Haiti in 2010. An 8.0 on the Richter scale is 10,000 times more powerful than a 5.0, and that was San Francisco in 1906. So you could see how small little bumps on the, let's say, top line has dramatic exponential impact to the bottom line. And when you understand that, those small causes create gargantuan differences in big results, now you know where to focus your time, energy, effort, and resources. And when you do, man, the results, the leverage that you get are awesome. So here's the mistake most people make in treating salespeople. They treat all salespeople equally. However, all salespeople are not delivering equal results. There is greater growth and leverage when you invest more in fewer. They will bring you the mass and the volume. Those few will bring you the mass and volume. You don't need to deal with the mass and volume yourself. Invest in the few, and they'll bring you the mass and volume. So, again, showing you the leverage return on an effort. If you focus your efforts on the 20% that produce 80%, you'll get a 16 times leverage point. Focus on the 4%, you'll get 250. Focus on the 0.8, you'll get 4,000. Focus on the 0.2, and you'll get 65,000% or times leverage. Let's take a look at activities. Certainly in the Insane Productivity Program, we're focusing on productivity and where you allocate your time, energy, and effort from a result standpoint. So let's look at the activities. So we know that 80% of your results come from 20% of the activities. 4% produce 64, and less than 1% produce half the effort, half the result. So let's just focus here on the 64% of your results coming from 4% activities. If you 2 times your effort on that 4%, it'll increase your results by 64%. Time allocated to the 4% gives you a 250 times leverage, okay? And then now stop spending time with the 80% of activities and you'll gain your life back. Let's drill this into a little bit deeper analysis. So this is the leverage curve here, okay? And most people are spending their time like this across all tasks, all solicitations on their time and attention, all emails, all things that come into their inbox, whether that's physical or virtual. Time is spread across them like this. Even still, they're getting big results from some things and really diminished results from other things, but their time is still across the board. What you want to do is to focus in this right corner. Reallocate your time, energy, and effort to this right corner. Now, if you really want to gain leverage, if you really want to end up on the cover of Success Magazine, if you really want to become wealthy and have a lifestyle of freedom and time, liberty, and the ability to do what you want when you want, then you even take this focus further. and you go to this smallest right corner possible, that means that time, energy, and effort spent here produces the gargantuan results you see on that leverage curve. That is the key. If you could just get this, really understand this. This is what, for the first time, sitting in that library of that centenarian's home, as he pounded on me about this concept, this was it. This is how he built his massive empire, by focusing on the smallest causes that produce the biggest results. Thus, he got the biggest results in little time, little energy, little effort to do so. That's leverage. That's massive success. We know this from the program. Warren Buffett says, for every 100 great opportunities that are brought to him, he says no 99 times. Now you can see the wisdom behind this important success principle. And the reason why he says this is the one thing that he would attribute all his extraordinary success to was saying no 99 out of 100 times. You see the leverage curve? He said no to 99% of the things to the left, so that he could focus his time and energy to the things on the right. This is also why Steve Jobs said he's as proud of the things that he didn't do. All those things on the left side of the curve that he didn't do, he's proud of, so that he could do the things to the far right, which created those great breakthroughs and created the dents that the universe now has. This is also why, and I want you to see these quotes again and have a totally different perspective on it. He says people think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are. You have to pick carefully. Success is saying no to 1,000 things. That means success is saying no to everything left on the leverage curve. Kenneth Cole, you remember this quote where he said success has less to do with what we can get ourselves to do? See, spreading yourself across that whole leverage curve is not the objective, and it has more to do with keeping ourselves from doing what we shouldn't, keeping yourself from doing everything on the left side of that leverage curve. So here it is again. You want to take the time you're spending on the left and stop doing it. Stop doing it entirely. It's giving you diminished results. And this is the reason why Peter Drucker says there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently. All those things that you're doing on the left that you might be doing awesomely, that which should not be done at all, because it's giving you diminished results. So the mistake most people make when it comes to allocating time to their activities is giving all tasks equal attention, when most things don't matter at all. Give major time only to major priorities. Stop doing everything else. See, most of us measure our days in volume. All the things that we get done, not in scale. There's a billionaire that I know, and when I interviewed him, he told me one of his keys to success was that he tries to accomplish only one thing per day. And I remember when I first heard this, I didn't get it. It's like, how can you just do one thing? I mean, okay, you spend more time on one thing, but how could you? He literally just did one thing per day. A very big thing, of course, but from the moment he woke up until he finished his day, he threw every available effort at that one thing. You see, most of us are measuring our days in volume, not in scale. How many checks we can make on our list, not how important one big check might be. So pick the one big thing to accomplish and let your morning open up with that as you focus on it as your first thoughts throughout the day and your last thoughts. Do that and measure yourself in scale, not in volume. And you remember from the Insane Productivity Curriculum, the Buffett method. This is also why now you can see this with a different lens of wisdom, where he would take his 3-point method of prioritization. Write all your priorities, get it out of your head, put it all on paper, now assess it down to your top 3, and then the third most important, throw the rest of the list away. Now you can see the wisdom in that kind of focus. And the reason why Mr. Steve Jobs would spend 3 hours every day focused on whatever was that number one priority, whatever was the thing that was to the very, very right of that leverage curve. That's where he'd allocate his time, which is the reason why he got exponentially greater leveraged returns. And the wisdom of Joel Osteen, how he spent all his week on one single activity, that one thing to the furthest right of the leverage curve. And that was his 22-minute keynote on Sunday morning that's televised to 40 million people. And because he spends all his time in that one activity, it's excellent, and his business gets a 65,000 to 1 leveraged return on his effort. So, summing it all up, here's what you want to do to focus and get massive leverage. Take 80% of the time that is being wasted to the left and reallocate it to the 20%, and you'll get a 16 times return. If you can reallocate it to the 4%, you'll get a 250 times return. To the less than 1%, a 4,000% or 4,000 times return, and to the 0.2%, a 65 times return. So the summary is this. Many businesses and individuals have easy access to dramatic improvements in profitability and productivity by focusing on the most effective areas and eliminating, ignoring, automating, delegating, or retraining the rest as appropriate. That's your leverage. Focus on the most effective areas. The few, the most narrow few. The more narrow, the more leverage you get from reallocated time, energy, and effort. As Michelangelo said, if you're going to pursue mastery, okay, this is what this whole session is about. You finding mastery. He said, if people knew how hard I had to work to gain my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. Is this stuff easy? No. I'll tell you what, once you get it, once you become disciplined, once you are able to set boundaries, reallocate your effort to those small causes that produce big results, all of life becomes a lot easier and a lot simpler. But getting yourself to the point of getting it, becoming disciplined, and creating boundaries for yourself to only focus on those few things that make the big result, that's where mastery lives. So I've got a worksheet for you that'll take you through each one of these categories so that you can find your massive leverage, those few small causes that produce the exponential return on results. So here's what I want you to do. If you enjoyed this segment, if you got something from it, if you had some major ahas or epiphanies, I want you to go to the Insane Productivity private Facebook page and tell others about it. I want them to be encouraged to find their way to this mastery session. And so your results, your enthusiasm, you go getting it and going, oh my God, this is it. This is going to have a big impact on my life, my results. Please share that enthusiasm, if you have it, on Facebook. I would appreciate it, and knowing that you're going to encourage somebody else to engage in this material and them finding their own leverage and getting exponential result as a result of your enthusiasm is what I'm after. So I hope you've enjoyed this. We've got more to come, so stay tuned for that. I think the next segment, is the 5 perverse pursuits of high-performance achievers. I think you will be shocked and amazed about what these perverse pursuits are that high-performing achievers have, and I want you to adopt some of these same perverse pursuits so that I can help you become as high-performing as possible. Thank you for joining me. Look forward to seeing you in the next session.